Hello everybody, Giselle Grenier here from ArtPlace.ca. This is the part of the Book of Backgrounds introductory series. This is the day 3 of the 5-part series, and in today's lesson we're going to work on our first background. Now, just so you know, there's a whole introductory part to this, so the process that I'm working here isn't typically what I would normally do. I would do all my backgrounds first, then create the paintings after they're done. In this particular series, I've already picked out what I'm going to be doing as the painting, just so you can kind of get a condensed version of this. Okay, normally I wouldn't be this organized. So for today's lesson, I'm going to be working on terrace skin, which is paper made from stone. I pulled out a few paints. I've got some, these are the Decor Media, they're fluid acrylics. I've got some Payne's Gray, transparent red iron oxide, quinacridone violet, quinacridone red, purple red, quinacridone gold, Daryl yellow, and titanium white. I'm going to have all the supplies listed so you don't have to pause and write everything down. I've got my number 8 bristle brush, the brand new one. The other one kind of bit the biscuit. And I've got a container here with some water and a lid because chaos is right over there, and some palette paper. So I prepared my palette off on the side, and what I want to show you is a lot of people have been asking me that sheet, the sheet that I use underneath a lot of my paintings. And I had originally bought a Ranger one. It cost me over $30. And then we found this, and for the life of me, can't remember where we found it. I think it was maybe Kitchen Stuff Plus or Bed Bath & Beyond. And it does the exact same thing. Okay. It's the exact same thing. $14.99. I paid that. Now Home Depot, I can't find this anymore, but Home Depot has one, but it's black and it's the same price. So I've got my palette here, and I laid out my colors with my violets, my red, oranges, and yellows, my earth tones and neutrals. Nothing's changed with that. And I'm gonna grab a sheet of terrace skin. Why I'm working with terrace skin is because this is going to be the first sheet in the book. And terrace skin being made from stone, it's tear resistant, okay, because it's not made from trees. And so that's what we're going to be using, nice and thick. It doesn't need to be primed, but you get a different effect if you prime it with gesso first. So with this thing here now, I'm going to be creating a background. Again, we're kind of cheating. We're doing everything in one series, but the idea for this painting is I'm creating a fire red background, very little physical texture. It's all going to be visual texture because we're going to be painting a black cat on this, which is Dennis. And painting Dennis on this because it's a pet portrait. The lesson for that one is how to paint black fur. I need something very smooth. I'm not going to make the painting terribly hyper realistic because that would take hours and hours and hours. A typical pet portrait for me, if it's in acrylics, will take hours. And I'm trying to keep these videos at a maximum 60 minutes. Okay, so we need to create a background on this. The actual painting, that's why when you're creating the book of backgrounds and you create your backgrounds, you choose the background that inspires an idea for a painting and you work with that. My challenge with this one is I want my book to be like this, but the painting of Dennis is going to be like this. So that's going to be a challenge for me unless I make the book this way, which may be a nice idea. I haven't done it like this before, which may be an idea, but let's stick with this. It's easier for filming. All right, so and let's get some paper towel. Reach over. Oops. The paper towel, I'm using the really, really good stuff because you end up using less. Viva. And just gonna dampen my brush a little bit. So fiery red. So I know that I'm going to have to makeshift the artwork a little bit, and I'll have to paint Dennis right in here, and we're going to do the background in here. So to make the fiery red, I'm using colors that are naturally next to each other on the color wheel so you don't get mud. You can do this with any color. So on the color wheel, if you think you've got your violets, your reds, your oranges, your yellows, and then the neutrals over here, if you take yellow and violet together, you're going to get kind of a mud. Okay, you're going to get a little bit of a mud there. So I'm going to have to keep the colors separate, let them dry, and when you lay transparent colors on top of each other, you get that visual texture. And Chaos is here. She's decided that she's going to bug me already. Dennis being black, I'm going to have to make sure that there's a lot of lighter colors here. Now you can see with Terra Skin, it does grab the paint okay. It's a bit slippery. And I'm just going to go around the color wheel. I'm just going to put some colors, and I want this to be very, very grungy. A lot of stuff happening. Go to the next color. These colors can touch each other, and it dries really quickly. Because this is water resistant, the color just sits on top. It doesn't get absorbed into the paper. That little bang that you heard was Chaos jumping on the table and going into the window. And when I overlap, I'm going to make sure I have something interesting there, so I don't have hard lines. And what's this one? This is quinacridone gold. What does that color? Oh, that's a nice color. Again, I'm making this very rough to get visual texture. Visual texture is the texture with the eye. It's not a flat gradation. Physical texture is you can touch it and you can feel the texture. And I'm doing it this way because I want the interest in here, because Dennis is black, and we're going to only be adding just a few elements in there for the highlights. I'm trying to think of the color here. This is transparent red iron oxide. I don't think I'm going to use much of that, but I am going to really plunk in the Payne's gray here, which will help. And when you're creating your backgrounds, what you may also want to do is on this side, it's fine. But when you're working, let's say when we flip it over and you don't want to damage this, you may want to put a piece of low-tack masking tape around the edges so the paint doesn't get around there. And the reason why, now I'm working, these are all single pigments except Payne's gray, and I picked Payne's gray. You can make it very easily with, let's say, burnt umber and ultramarine blue and any type of brown and blue. I chose this one because I am out of burnt umber. I should be getting it tomorrow. I like pre-mixing my colors because you don't need a lot. All right, let's go back to some of the violets. Again, doesn't matter what color you use. Just make sure you've got lots of action happening. I'm leaving a little bit of white there because that's where the yellow is going to go. Because he's such a dark animal, that I do need the contrast. And the other thing with creating the physical texture like this is he's always hiding in the bushes underneath my window. He's my neighbor's cat, and he's always hiding in the bushes, and I thought this would be kind of cool look because the bush looks like, well, not with the pinks, but it looks like that. So I'm going to let this dry, and then we've got all these blank spots here, but I'm going to use the rest of the paint here just to build up more of an opaque finish. So I'm just going to take the Payne's gray and I'll just fill that in and take the rest of the transparent red iron oxide. And we'll just fill that in. I don't want to waste paint. Normally I would just take the paint and go into another journal or another surface and just use that up. I'm going to put my brush in the water. Now what you can do too, if you want to create some additional textures, that you can just take your paper towel and push that. When you pull it up, you get some really, really interesting effects. I'm also blotting up any excess paint, especially here. I don't want any bumps of paint because when it comes time to painting Mr. Dennis, I don't want things like that bump in paint. If I'm painting his eyes, that will will cause some problems. I'm getting some really interesting texture in there. All right, I'm going to get a different brush. And I'm going to go with the yellow. This, oops, that was dry. Go with the yellow, and I'm just going to put the yellow in there. When you're layering the colors on top of each other, it shows up one way. But if you physically mix together, you're going to get something completely different. And I'll show you that with the excess paint on the palette. This is just glazing color. And I didn't get to take a picture of the sky yesterday, but the sky, when the sun was setting, the sky was this color. It was unbelievable. I didn't get a picture because I was too lazy to put my outdoor clothes on. I was in a really, really grungy night shirt because the temperature was 39 degrees and it was just so hot and I was miserable. So I'm adding a layer of this yellow everywhere. And you want to make sure that the layer is transparent. And using the good quality paints like this, the transparency is written on the bottle, so it makes it really easy for you to figure out which one you're going to be using. And I'm going to go slightly inside because I'm not quite sure how I'm going to position. It's better to go more in, because if I'm going to paint Dennis here, then I don't want to have a hard line. So I'm going to bring the yellow right into the painting. All right, I think we're pretty good there. Oh, I'm going to have to get some more yellow. I love this really grungy graffiti look. And you don't have to do it this way. You can do it whatever way you want. I want to show you, let me just put a little bit more. I want to show you what happens when you mix the yellow with the violet together. This is why it's so important to let it dry. And the other thing is I don't even need my heat gun because it is so hot outside. This stuff is drying super fast. Now the more layers of transparent paint that you put on there, the more opaque it's going to become. So keep that in mind when you're painting as well. And if you start feeling your piece getting tacky, you need to stop. Otherwise, you may run the risk of pulling the paint up. There we go. That takes care of that. So let me bring this over. We'll let that puppy dry. And I'll just use this brush. So I've got some yellow here. I'm just going to rinse I'm going to do this differently. I'm going to rinse my brush. I'm going to put some fresh paint on here. So when we were laying, you saw we were laying the yellow next to the violet. The color is fine. But if you were to mix the violet with the yellow, that's what you get. Okay, let me just get my swatch book for my journal. I've got a journal on the ready here for leftover paint, just so you can see what it is. Okay, and you've got, this is your, that's your violet. And, oh, I hear a doggy barking. Mia should start barking anytime now. And that's your yellow. But when you've got the violet that dries and you bring it a little bit closer, because it's transparent, the yellow actually just sits. How would you actually be able to paint inside like this if it was wet? See the difference? And you get a nice kind of a rusty orange there. But that's why, for what I wanted to do to get that real street look, is I wanted to keep the colors next to each other. So we have that here. So I've got some paint left over, so why don't we do another version of this? But let me grab my journal. And let's just go over here. Actually, let's just do it over here. And what I'm going to do is grab the white. That doggy out there is not happy. So I'm just going to take white. Oh, let me grab a piece of wax paper. Put the wax paper here. That'll just protect the pages underneath. So I'm applying the paint roughly, okay? Then if I take, let's say, some of the red and come in here, see what happens with the red, mixes with the white, and you get kind of like that pastel-y look. I'm gonna rinse my brush to get rid of the white. I just had to go and take a quick look to see what dog was barking. That was the dog right across from us, which is Mia's arch nemesis. We don't get along. Okay, so this is just giving you an idea. If you just have, like, say red and white. If you're watching this, you're very likely to have red paint in your paint box. You probably are. You have a purple too. And I'm doing this more of a dry brush, just so you can use the texture of the paper for an idea. The paper is drying very quickly. Okay, and I'll have to bring some yellow out. Now this is the burnt orange, which is transparent. Not liking that too much. And if we, I don't want to have anything terribly bright along the edges because it just draws your eye. Anything really tiny or very detailed on the outside edge of your painting will attract your eye away from your main subject. For example, if I were just to take a piece of purple and put that there like that, when you look at the painting, that your eye would just go to that immediately. That's why I really fade stuff out and diffuse it on the edges. Okay, so let me just rinse that, and I'll grab a little bit more yellow. Let me grab another paper towel. Actually, you know what? Let's try an experiment. I don't have any baby wipes handy, so I'm going to use Clorox wipes. If you use Clorox wipes, when I pull it down, I'm just going to wipe the excess off. Be very careful how frequently you use this. Now, this could be different for you, but my skin tends to dry out tremendously when using them. And I can take this now, and I'm just going to wipe up some excess. And if you do this technique, we're going to do this in another videos. You can put a stencil down and rub. When you do this, though, make sure that the paper you're using is a good quality paper. This is just very inexpensive paper. This is the stuff that comes in the little art kits, and I didn't want to use anything expensive for my paint swatches. Take the yellow now. Making sure it's dry. Making sure it's dry. So anywhere where there's white, the yellow, because it's transparent, is just going to fill in the white. And I can overlay the purple without any mud being generated. Put a little bit of water in there because I don't want to pull out any more paint. Okay, so this is just a bit more of a softer look. Bringing a lot of water in there. I want to just tint in the blank parts. There we go. So that's a bit of a softer look versus that. Okay, I wanted something a lot rougher. Okay, and then you can just take the rest of the paint, just so you don't waste it, and just throw it in to, you know, a back page or an extra page, because you never know what you can what you'll be able to get out of it, you know, for another painting. Just smush that paint on there, and when you work the next background, throw the rest of the paint on here, you know, just so you don't waste it. You never know what it's going to inspire. And then what I like doing too, it might be too late because the paint is pretty well wet. Didn't do much on that. Just take the palette and just smush it down right on the paper. Oh, that's cool. Look at that. That is really neat. Bet I couldn't do that again if I wanted to. There we go. Because not only can you use these backgrounds just for inspiration for something else, is that if you're making, let's say, an ATC or a postcard or something, you can actually take these pages and cut them out, and they're already painted for you. Easy. Even a greeting card, you can cut a piece out and just lay it on top of another card, so it's really easy. So I'm going to put this aside. And now, the people that have been asking me about the no stick mat. So I did my painting on this. It's still the same. I didn't wipe off, so I take this off and just wipe. Oh, the camera, I think the camera's shaking. I apologize. There we go. Easy peasy. So I'm going to be looking up where I can get another one of these, because you can use a heat gun on this as well. Just once you use it for painting, don't use it for cooking. I know that sounds silly, but you would, yeah, you wouldn't believe how many people will, oh, I need a mat. Anyways, there you go. It's ready for the next piece. Alrighty. So now we're ready. So basically what the true meaning of the book of backgrounds is that you would just do a whole bunch of these backgrounds, and then bind them in a book, and then when something inspires you for painting, you flip through, you say, oh, I like this, then you create your artwork on top of that. Again, it's meant for experimenting, so it would inspire you to create something on a canvas or use the actual piece in the book of backgrounds as is. In the traditional sense, once you finish this, you can go to the other side, create a new background, and you could put low-tack tape on the back side so you don't get any paint transferring. And I'm looking at this now, and I already know, I have an idea of, I'm going to create something all like very similar to this, but dry brushed. And this is really inspiring, this ratted, real grungy looking thing. And so I know what I'm going to do for a background for this one. All right, so your adult homework is to create a background. Doesn't matter the colors, doesn't matter the brushes, doesn't matter whatever. Just create a background with visual texture. This is smooth. There's nothing physical about it. So I can create a very detailed painting and I'm not going to lose anything. So create something with a very visual textured background. Good contrast of colors. Do not make the whole background this color, because when we paint the cat, you're not going to be able to see anything. Or if you want to paint a dog, the whole purpose is to show you the technique. So create your background, have some light splotches of color there for contrast, and let it dry. In the next lesson, we're going to create the outline for Dennis, which will give this plenty of time to dry. And because when we transfer it, you have to make sure this is 100% dry. Otherwise, I got white paint on this. Otherwise, you're going to be actually pulling the paint up when you transfer the drawing. So this has to be dry. So I will see you in the next lesson.